Welcome to our audience around the world and from here in Atlanta. We have guests from every corner of the world to discuss this very important topic on the religion violence nexus when it comes to violence against women, and how the development of a new treaty on violence against women, the Every Woman Treaty, will help us get to that place where we are really addressing fundamental problems with violence against women. Today's discussion will focus on this question of how religion can be a force for oppression and also a force for progress when it comes to ending violence against women. So it's my pleasure and my honor to welcome our guests that I will introduce to you in a moment. We have Najet Zammouri, the Vice President of the Tunisian Human Rights League. We have Meera, the Executive Vice President of the Guild of Service. We have Najla Ayoubi, the Chief of Coalitions and Global Programs for the Every Woman Treaty, and Sharon, the Executive Director of Collaboration of Women in Development. And they're going to introduce themselves more fully when we get into the discussion. I'm just so delighted. Look at this beautiful picture and from everywhere in the world. And I'll let you each tell us where you're calling from when you come on. And let me first introduce the topic, which is near and dear to our hearts here at the Carter Center. For the last 11 or 12 years, President Jimmy Carter, the former president of the United States, who himself is a man of faith, really started taking on the question of how religion can be really a force of inspiration to advance human rights broadly. And when we really started looking at the question of how religion affects women's rights, we had to dig really deep. And President Carter wrote this book in 2014. It's called A Call to Action, Women, Religion, Violence, and Power. And of course, that last word, power, is very important because we see, and in the writing of this book, the research that we did for it, we could see that really this is a question of power, of how religion, this very powerful force in society, is a force in people's lives, both individually, but also institutionally, how it affects the institutions that govern our lives. So this it came from a very interesting place from President Carter's own personal perspective as a Southern white evangelical male Christian from the South here in Georgia, who was also president of the United States, the most powerful position, one of the most powerful positions, political positions in the world at the time. How did he come to this conclusion as a devout Christian himself that this topic needed to be addressed head on? And how this came about was in the Southern Baptist Convention, which his church was a member of, there was a decision to eliminate women from the leadership of the church, so that women could not preach, could not teach boys, very specific gender-oriented exclusions around women. And he and Mrs. Carter really found that that was just unacceptable to them as Christians and human rights activists. President Carter had really put human rights at the front of his policy agenda, both as governor of Georgia and as president of the United States. And he also advanced the Equal Rights Amendment in the United States, appointed more women in cabinet positions and judges. He felt that until women were equally represented and equally protected, that the United States and the world could not advance appropriately. So the fact that his own organization, his own faith was coming out against women's rights, he decided to take a stand and resigned from the Southern Baptist Convention. So this really opened up a conversation that we have been having now for 11, 12 years at the Carter Center. Can religion be a force for good when it comes to women's rights? We know the stories of how a religion is used to oppress women, but are there examples of how religion can really be mobilized? People of faith can be mobilized to help liberate women and men together toward equal human rights for all. So this is the basis of this conversation. And wow, are we excited to have these 4 women with us to really unpack this and discuss it. So my first guest, our first guest today will be Najet Zammouri, the Vice President of the Tunisian League for Human Rights, Tunisian Human Rights League, which of course in Tunisia, we know that there has been a really difficult struggle over the role of religion and women's rights. So Najet, please tell us what you think about this really important topic.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Karin. Thank you very much, Najla, for giving us this opportunity to speak about a very difficult topic, I shall say. Yeah, so I'm Najet Zammouri, the Vice President of the Tunisian Human Rights League, Chief of Women's Rights Department. Yes, as you said, we can't be feminist in just one day, or, you know, so I have been fighting for women's rights now for more than 30 years, you know. The first time I heard the word feminism was in high school. Actually, I was about 17 years old, and I was moving heaven and earth to create a club for high school girls, because we were victims of discrimination and sexual harassment, even by our own teachers, you know. It was not easy at all. And then, of course, my French teacher asked me to read the book of Simone de Beauvoir, The Second Sex, and then I didn't stop at all fighting until now, you know. Yeah, yeah. The context of Tunisia actually is very complex for many reasons. We can say that Tunisia is much better than many countries in the Arab world and in Africa. But we shall say that I think all the monotheistic, you spoke about Christianism, but I think that all the monotheistic religions have dealt with the topic of women. When I say topic, it's a social meaning. The woman is considered only as wife and partner in the constitution of the house, you know, as a mother, where she holds the responsibility for the education of her children, and must properly prepare them to confront life and its difficulties, but never as a full-fledged citizen who must participate in public affairs. For example, just I give an example, the laws of Islam, for example, have guaranteed power and domination to men. The role of power of the leader, of the decision maker, is dedicated to men. The woman has only that of the receiver. She should be faithful. She should obey. She should be a teacher for her children. Sharia, we call it Sharia also. Sharia is the Islamic law, because we have civic law and Islamic law, of course. Sharia as being incompatible with women's rights. We have to say that I think we have to be courage. We have to be courage enough to say it, to be honest, and to tell it to the people. Sharia is incompatible with women's rights, and often portrayed as particularly regressive in terms of women's rights, leaving it open to varying interpretations by governments and religion leaders, as exactly as happened in Tunisia after the uprising of 2011. Just, I want to give you some examples, maybe from the Sharia, that people can understand more about that. In the Sharia, girls are sexual property for their male owners. I quote, and forbidden to you are wedded wives of other people, except those who have fallen in your hands. What does it mean, fallen in your hands? It means the slaves, so you can own girls. This is the Sharia I'm speaking about now, right now, countries who are applicating Sharia in their own countries. Men also may be polygamous with up to 4 wives. In the Sharia, I quote, and if you are apprehensive that you will not be able to do justice to the orphans, you may marry 2 or 3 or 4 women whom you choose. But if you apprehend that you might not be able to do justice to them, then marry only 1 wife or marry those who have fallen in your possessions. I think my husbands in the Sharia and Islam may also hit their wives if they fear the their authorities. I mean, men in Islam, if he fears the authority of a woman, a powerful woman, for example, he has the right to hit her, to beat her. I quote, if you fear high-handedness from your wives, remind them, then ignore them when you go to bed, then hit them. If they obey you, you have no right to act against them. God is most high, etc. So, but we have to say, to be honest too, we have to say that maybe only in Tunisia, the many innovations are mostly foreign to the Islamic normative system. And thanks to the civil society and feminist association, I have to say that. Examples include the prohibition of polygamy by law and the penal sanctions attached to it, or the initiative of divorce granted to women on the same terms as men, or recently the adoption of the law against violence against women in 2017. So maybe Tunisia is until now in the front line of many Arab worlds where they applicate still this Sharia, which is totally against the rights of women.
Thank you, Najet. That was a very important introduction. I think Tunisia is a very important context where, despite the oppression of the Ben Ali regime, there was an advancement of women's rights going back decades that has been extremely important. A secular structure where religious power was minimized for decades. So this is a very important context, and to see the resurgence of the push and the call for Islamic law, or this particularly narrow interpretation of Islamic law, has been very troubling, of course. But to see the civil society really leading and saying, we are fighting for this, we are not going to lose those rights that women have enjoyed, is very, very important for us to learn from and to see. I know it's very difficult. So thank you for that introduction. I'm going to go now to Betty Sharon, who is with us, the Executive Director of the Collaboration of Women in Development. Can you introduce yourself, Betty, and tell us how you see this nexus between religion and women's rights? What are the challenges and the opportunities to you?
Thank you very much. My name is Betty Sharon. I am the Executive Director of Collaboration of Women in Development, a grassroots women organization in Kenya. And we are also the members of Every Woman Treaty. I have been in this work for more than 20 years now. And thank you for coming up with this very, very important topic. For me, I am a victim of women in religious violence. I was born in a very religious family. Both of my grandparents were religious leaders. My paternal grandfather was a pastor, and my maternal grandfather was a religious leader, a very senior person in the church, and again, a very senior person in politics. And I am the first daughter in the family. And that did put me in a very critical place. So when my follower got married, that is when the rain started beating me. My parents was like, now I am becoming a bad omen in the family. My follower is already married. And remember, she was married as an underage. She got pregnant when she was 17, and then she ran off with her boyfriend. So for me, I was a shame in the family. I was bringing shame in the family. So I had to get married. So the first boyfriend I got, I had to get married to that boyfriend. But I got into the prison, and I stayed in that prison for 8 good years. The only thing I could get from my parents and my grandparents is that once you are married is until death do you part. And this is a very, very wrong statement in the Christianity, especially now that violence against women and domestic violence is increasing in every corner of the world. I stayed in a very, very violent marriage, but I could not get out because, first of all, is that if I get out, I'll be bringing shame in the family. Second, there is no way I can be out of my marriage and my sister, who is young, is able to maintain her marriage. So I have to stay in that marriage and live with my husband and pray for him to get saved so that we can live peacefully. But you find that Christianity is about love, it's about peace, it's about respect. But this man was not respecting me. And the fact that he knew that my parents and my family were not on my side, so he was on the side of the family. But you look at the Christianity and you look at the women of the Bible, like women like Esther, like Shira, the mother of Moses, who resisted violence against women and went against even the leaders and the kings. And as I was reading the Bible and seeing women of the Bible who were strong and had faith and could not allow themselves to endure the violence, then I said, no, I have to come out of this marriage and be myself and be with God. So God and Jesus will be my protector if my own family could not protect me, and even my friends who are looking down on me that I could not manage my marriage. So partnering with the religious leaders, especially the Jimmy Carter Center, it's very, very important for every women treaty. Why? Because the domestic violence, the youth killing their girlfriends, men defiling their own children, men killing their women, children killing their fathers, their parents, their sisters, their siblings has become too much. And it is not only in Kenya, it's not only in maybe Uganda or in Africa, but it is all over the world. It is high time that the religious leaders come in and talk about not only peace, but peace and justice. Because you find even in the Bible, when Susanna was raped, Daniel came in to protect her. Let the religious leaders also come in to protect the girls and women who are violated, but they protect them through justice. Because justice brings hope. Justice brings peace. But when there is no justice, people are just calm. Is cooking in a corner. When it erupts, that is when you find that families are killing each other. We need to have dialogue with religious leaders and talk to them to teach the word, especially the Christians. Let them teach the word of love as Jesus loved us. Thank you.
Well, Betty, thank you so much for your testimony, both your own experience, which is so painful, so deep and profound, and thank you for sharing that that story, that history that you bring to this question, because for you to share that with us and then to be able to say that you, as a believer yourself in God, that you see how you see the way forward to really demand of the religious leaders that they step forward in a way that you believe is consistent with Jesus' teachings. This is very powerful because, you know, in this conversation, we often think, well, let's just do away with religion. Let's just ignore it because it's so oppressive. But what might happen if people of faith really do make the demand, as you are doing, to say, wait, you have it wrong. You have it wrong. This is not what was meant. So I'm finding that very powerful testimony, Betty. Thank you for sharing that with us. And now I would like to bring in our next guest, Meera Khanna, the Executive Vice President of the Guild of Service. Introduce us to yourself, Meera, and where you're calling from today.
Thank you, Karen. And at the outset, let me thank both Carter Center and Every Woman Treaty for giving me this priceless opportunity. I'm calling in from India. I'm a writer by profession and a gender rights activist by inclination. I have been the trustee and executive vice president of a 50-year-old civil society organization working for empowerment of women and children, underprivileged women and children, and have had the privilege of being a co-founder of the Every Woman Treaty. And before I actually begin, I would like to say that there were 3 moments in my life when like Edison, a bulb just switched on in my mind. The first was when I was 13, but the bulb switched on much later, when the young girl who was the daughter of the person working in our house and whose education was being supported by my mother. She was 13 years old and wanted to become a doctor. One summer she went home, but she went to her village. She did not come back. Her parents said that due to the pressure of the elders in the community and the village, a 13-year-old girl had been married off to a 28-year-old man. The mother did tell us about how this little girl cried throughout her wedding ceremony. 2 years later, we got to know that she died due to excessive bleeding during pregnancy. Now and she was my friend too. And, and her name was Manju, but there was this Manju's face crying during the wedding, which remained in my mind for a very long time. And as I started this work of gender rights activism, I realized that how much child marriage is an extremely pernicious kind of violence against women and girls, and it exists in so many parts of the world, as including India. The second bulb that switched on in my mind was when we were doing a kind of a survey on violence against women, particularly domestic violence, and a large number of women, almost 45 to 47% of women, actually condoned and supported wife beating. And they actually took religion and said that religion also says that if a woman is to be corrected, and that is okay. That came as an absolute shock to the feminist in me. And the third light was, there is a declining sex ratio in India. And of course, now it is bettered. But the declining sex ratio was because of sex selective abortion. There was a son preference, so female fetus would be aborted. And this was very high in certain northern states, particularly in Punjab. But the religious institution in Punjab made a public call on how killing of a fetus was actually tantamount to murder. And within a decade, the sex ratio in that state came down. So that was a bulb when I realized that it is not just the state or civil society organizations that can work towards a gender just world, but the most important thing is also how religious institutions work for a violence-free and a gender just world. Having said that, and let me come to Hinduism, and I'm going to talk about women's rights from the lens of Hinduism. Hinduism is based on a multi-theism and upholds human equality on the basis that all are God's creatures. What we say, Vasudeva Kutumbakam, meaning the whole world is a family and we are all members of that family. The pillar of Hinduism is based on dharma, which is a Sanskrit expression of widest import and can mean that which contains or upholds the cosmos, which means dharma implies that you have to maintain the cosmic order as well as the individual and the social order, which means you have a dharma by virtue of one's birth, one's gender, profession, status, your citizenship, and your as a human. Now, for example, the right to equality is governed by the dharma of everyone doing his ordained duty. So a woman is equal to a man in her access to education, in her right to own property, in her right to security. It is a dharma of her parents and the men of the family and the state to ensure that that's right to security is hers. Conversely, it is also the woman's dharma to use her capacity as a creator, to nurture, to use her talent and capacity for herself, for the family, community, and the nation. Now, the entire Hinduism, to a great extent, is the Vedas are actually a great window to Hinduism as it's a record of the existence of Hinduism so many years back. Now, the four Vedas actually reads like a feminist document. The position of women indicated in the various stanzas is something that makes a die-hard feminist like me jump with joy. For example, in the Atharva Veda, Canto 7, 36.3, they say, "O woman, you know everything. Please provide us with the strength of prosperity and wealth." And there's the other canto which says, "Hey, you wife, I am knowledgeable, you are also knowledgeable. If you are the Samaveda, I am the Rig Veda." The meaning of the word wife, Patni, actually is one who leads the husband through life. Or Dharma Patni is one who guides the husband in the Dharma. So if you look at the Rig Veda, you actually feel that the husband is one guy who requires guidance by his wife or by the female members of his family. Now, then comes the question that in this world view of fairness, equality, propriety, individual, cosmic balance and order, how did this notion of discrimination, degradation, devaluing a woman's life and consequently violence, how did that creep in? Now, it's interesting that the dynamics of power is always justified by emphasizing the values of care and protection. So the positive, soft concepts are reconstructed to justify hard concepts like power and patriarchy. Now, power and patriarchy become synonymous because as human civilization progressed, power became vested in masculinity. And what probably began as a convenience in an agricultural pastoral community, from a pastoral community in India particularly, they changed into an agricultural community. Now, when it is an agricultural community, there is need for more and more land. So it is not land for need, but land also for greed. So when you need more land, then you need to have a standing army to take other people's land. Now, given the exigencies of child caring and rearing and the time consuming activities, women got sidelined in this aggressive climate of land holding. So that, coupled with patriarchy, power based on the land holding, coupled with patriarchy and an aggressive climate, slowly sidelined women. And when women got sidelined and the men were there, the progeny had to be protected. If the progeny has to be protected, the receptacle of progeny are the women. So they have to be protected. And if they are protected, then that means they are weaker. So the protected becomes weak, the protector becomes strong. And protecting the weak becomes a responsibility, a burden. And when there is a burden, then there is a son preference because he is the protector. So from this son preference and this aggressive climate, that is where women's rights got devalued and women became vulnerable to violence. Now, obviously, in contrast, it's very interesting, and this question has often been asked to me, that in contrast, even though women are devalued in the socio-cultural ethos, on the other hand, they are deified. They are goddesses. And we have a goddess for practically every resource. For example, Durga is the goddess of power. Annapurna is the goddess of food. Saraswati is the goddess of education. Lakshmi is the goddess of wealth. Now, this creates a contradiction. On the one hand, there is declining sex ratio, feticide, a lack of access to nutrition and education of the girl child, domestic violence, rape and sexual assault, both in public and private spaces, stigmatization of widows. How does that come along with the deification of the woman as a goddess? My theory is that everybody knows what human dignity is. So when in the socio-cultural situation you make a woman vulnerable to violence, it is a salvage to the racial consciousness by deifying the women. So you put the woman in a temple, but you don't give her equal rights to property. And I do have a small poem which I wrote many years back on this. I would like to read out an extract if I have your permission, Karen.
Yes, please.
This is an extract from a poem which I wrote many years back called Svashakt, which actually means empowered. And this is actually a woman talking to her unborn daughter. And because of son preference, she could be asked to abort that female feticide. She says, "My daughter, they call you Devi, yet you are a curse. You are Annapurna, yet denied food. You are Saraswati, yet unlettered. You have a temple, only my womb is denied. You have divinity, but denied life. Am I a creator or just a procreator? Am I an identity or just a womb? Am I a woman or just a channel for man? Am I a mother or just a son bearer?" On those lines, I think I'll stop my presentation and leave the rest for questions.
Well, thank you so much, Meera. That was beautiful. A good way to end. And I think, wow, what a terrific education. I know I just received from you about the origins and sort of how this shifted from a construct of powerful women to a construct of women that were made weak by the structures that were set up. Of course, this is what we see. And just to point out an example from our own country here, it was, some 40 years ago or so, one of the political parties in my country got together and decided to make reproductive rights a wedge issue in the politics. This was not the case. Some people don't know this. Before this group of people got together to come up with a strategy to make abortion a wedge issue in American politics, even evangelical Christians were pro-choice, according to the surveys that were done at the time in the 70s, late 60s and early 70s. The idea of the government telling you what to do with your body was anathema to American ethos, right? But there were a group of people, men, mostly men, some women, but I think this particular group was probably all men. And we had a meeting recently where one of those men who were in the room talked about this and expressed his deep remorse that there was this effort to create the abortion issue as a political advantage for one, I won't name them, but for one of our political parties. And we see the havoc that has wreaked in my country, to the point where women have just lost reproductive rights in the United States. It was really almost unbelievable that this could happen. But this was the manipulation of religious beliefs of people. Many, ardent, just firm believing Christians just came to believe that this is what it means to be a Christian, is to oppose a woman's choice. So this is very powerful, and we know this, and we know that we can't ignore this power that religious institutions and language involves. We had a conference, and Najla, I'm not sure if you were at this one, but we had a conference at the Carter Center where it led to a very fascinating discussion among Muslim scholars and women in Islam, like Sisters in Islam, and Musawa, another group that works on, that is very assertively Muslim, Islamic, but feminist, which led to fascinating conversations about what could happen within the concept of ijtihad in Islam, which is this idea that you adjust that the religion itself and the institutions of the faith must adjust to the times and can be reviewed and refreshed. That concept of ijtihad, it became part of the conversation, which led to a conference actually at the Alexandria Library in Egypt, where women Islamic scholars came together to advocate for ijtihad, under a new ijtihad on behalf of women. So it's this idea that the power of scholarship and interpretation can be in the hands of women and in the hands of feminists is very, very interesting. It's challenging, no doubt, but very interesting. So let me turn it over to our instigator here, Judge Najla Ayoubi, who's a great friend of the Carter Center and has been with us, and we've had the opportunity to discuss these challenging questions many times. Judge Ayoubi, please tell us, give us your background, your story, and then maybe you could lead us into the conversation about how a treaty, the Every Woman Treaty, can really help us advance this question. And also, let me just, before Judge Ayoubi speaks, if anyone in the audience would like to ask a question, be thinking about that, and we'll have some time for questions in a few minutes. Judge Ayoubi, if you could unmute yourself and join us in this conversation, we'd love to hear from you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Karen. I would like to also thank the Carter Center. It's a great partnership with Every Woman Treaty, and we really appreciate. And also thank you for our panelists here. Also, my friends, all of them are my friends, and I'm proud to be part of this conversation. One thing that, based on what we are discussing today, I found that there is so much commonality among all of these religions that we are coming from Muslim to Christianity to Hinduism. So that's something that we just have to admit, that this is the common, unfortunately, the common issue among all of these religions. My experience is that why I am in this work, why I'm fighting for women's rights, and particularly for ending violence against women, is my mom was a victim of a survivor of child marriage herself, and from a very young age, hearing from her and listening to her story was always made me, why this has to happen, because she was 12 when she was engaged, and I believe now we are discovering that probably she was 13 that she got married. So it means that she was very young, and she did not have the childhood a 13-year-old or 12-year-old girl should have. So that's what it brings me to why this happened, because the religion actually allows the father and the guardian of the girls to marry them whomever they want and whenever they want. So that's basically bringing the issues again with Najet that she mentioned about in my context, the men can beat their wives. While imagine if my father was a good person, he was a human rights activist himself, but to still, if a 13-year-old girl go to the house with a family, with a man, and then man has all over the control, because majority of these marriages are happening with the man that they are double of their age, as Meera mentioned of her friend. So that's why the matter of the control definitely become one of the issues. Another piece that the men even can beat the wife because they cannot say anything, because that's something that the religion permits them. Another piece that also really strikes me in my context, that the witness, a woman, this is the matter of control, that how the religion permits the society to count women as two women as a one person in the cases of providing witness or being witness. In inheritance rights, that's also another piece, that two women can be counted as a one man. So it means that we all work hard. At least I'm talking about from my family perspective. We work so hard, mainly in our family, all equally. But now, when the properties will be divided, I will get quarter of it. The four sisters will get half, and my two brothers will get half. So it means that there is another injustice or inequality on inheritance. And again, that's the economic power of the men that they kept for themselves. So another piece that is also mainly it's happening in my context also, that women can be in any time can be used as a property, basically, even if you're a mother or a girl or a sister or a wife or a daughter, that you are the property of the man. Means that they have the honor of protecting you, as Meera mentioned, that this is something that the protection comes with the power, of course. When they have the protection in title, then they definitely will come with the power. And actually, unfortunately, this is also bring the impunity to the male, that whatever they want to do with the life of woman, they can do, because that's the religion permits them. They can kill them, they can marry them, they can starve them to not giving them food, or they can prohibit them at least even practicing the right. So with all of these, how the religion actually, in my context, it worked, because, for instance, like in my family, my grandfather was a religious person. My father was practicing Islam. But the interesting part was that why we became a very powerful woman, because we had that opportunity from my grandfather, from my father, at least to use the religion as a peaceful religion. That we say Islam is a peaceful religion, but all of these can basically be a good practice for the man in the religious leaders, that they can promote the peace and also the equality among the men and women in the society. They have the power. When they have the power to control women, they also have the power to promote the culture of justice, the culture of equality, and the culture of basically the culture of the peace and injustice. So what can be done, particularly right now through the treaty, what we are right now working on, to how the religion can play a very big role in basically on what we are proposing. We have 5 specific proposals through our treaty. That one is the legal reform, the prevention, training in accountability for professionals and like doctors, nurses, and judges, and police, and whomever are the first responders of the violence against women and girls. The third item is the prevention education is the key, because this is where the religious elders are really can play a huge role, providing the prevention education on ending violence against women, particularly based on the scientific research. It shows that the social mindset of the men and boys are happening between the age of 9 to 22. So it means that age is very important for all of us to make sure that the religious elders can play a very good role in preventing violence against women and girls. So, and also the providing shelters, which in many cases we see lots of faith organizations are providing the shelters for the victims and survivors of violence. So that can be also another place where they can put the efforts. And of course, the funding and the monitoring and evaluation, they are the one, they have the power to basically bring this concept to their followers, basically, how they can promote the culture and the issues of the women's rights, ending violence against women, particularly in with their followers. So I will stop here. Of course, the funding is definitely another issue that we can definitely talk about it later, but it's something that we are proposing through the treaty. Thank you so much. I will stop here, and I'm open to questions too.
Thank you, Najla. That was very helpful. And I know also in your home country of Afghanistan, there have been what we hear now is the horror stories about the rule of the Taliban, etc. I know that I've heard other stories as well about when religious leaders were involved in some good programs. So there has been, you don't hear that in the news, because what we hear is the terrible realities that are overriding this question. And there were opportunities earlier before this became such an all-out war. That, of course, when we know that when war happens, everything goes out the window. and it's all about control and power. So I just wanted to pick up on one thing, and then we really want to talk about the treaty and how it can make a difference and how people can get involved. We have a long-time partnership with an organization in West Africa called Tostan. And one of the amazing stories from Tostan was an imam from Nigeria who participated in the program in Senegal that emphasized, there's Mohammed Sharif Diop, who is an Islamic scholar from Senegal, has studied the Quran. He went to Al-Azhar in Egypt and consulted about whether genital mutilation was actually an Islamic practice. And they said, no, this is not Islamic, it's cultural. And so he goes back to Senegal and starts really working with imams to end violence against women in the villages. And long story short, this has been very interesting outcomes where imams and the traditional women who were doing the cutting, the genital cutting, have ended the practice in thousands of villages, really on a religious basis, that this was not Islamic, that it was cultural, that the women had spoken up and said, we don't want to do this anymore, our girls are harmed. And it has had this impact. And because of the backing of the imams, it had influence. And this one imam from Nigeria came to the training and saw this and said, wow, we need to bring this to Nigeria. So he had 300 imams reporting to him within the NASFAT, which is the Nigerian umbrella organization. And he brought in doctors to show the harm of genital cutting, why it's harmful medically. But then he brought in the human rights language and from the Quran itself and said, this is not Islamic, and it is harmful, and it is not in keeping with our teachings. And so he has been guiding this group of imams to help eliminate the practice in their communities. It doesn't solve every problem, obviously, but these are entrenched beliefs that take generations to change. But when you can see that religious leaders, if they seize it, can have you can let your imagination run wild if people really adjust their framework as a believer in God and as a person who sees their influence to marshal that power on behalf of the human rights of women. What could be possible? I know it seems remote in many places, but we have seen it happen. So now let's shift to this question of how the treaty can really help us in this. You already touched on it a little bit, Najla, there in your introduction to the treaty. Let me start with Najet. Do you have any thoughts about how this treaty will get us closer to this goal?
Yeah. First of all, I think that religion shouldn't be interfered with politics. I mean, we have to separate religion from the state. Religion is something personal. The faith is something personal. It's an individual freedom. So we have to separate state from religion, any religion. I'm not only speaking about Islam. Why? All the states should be based on citizenship. Why? Because citizenship organizes a society in which all members are legally and politically equal, whatever their origins and characteristic, or their religions, or their beliefs. They are equal in front of law. It is based on the idea of the equal dignity of all human beings and implement prevention education campaigns based on rigorous evidence of effectiveness. And here is the role of the treaty. The treaty should strengthen, a global treaty will strengthen the protection of the rights of women and girls and promote full implementation states parties, laws, policies, and measures, so that institutions against violence are established and maintained for the well-being of all human beings, whatever are their religion. I believe that the adoption of a binding convention on the elimination of violence against women of all ages, because I think I repeat, it's very important as we raise this issue of religion. I mean, we don't have to look at these they are personal choices. They are really, it's something between us and God. So we don't have to involve a religion with the state. We have to separate them. That is my opinion, and I think that the global treaty should strengthen the state of citizenship and rule of law. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Najet. And we hear this call all over the world to separate the faith powers from the state. Very essential. Betty, tell us your thoughts about how this treaty will help us get to this goal of ending violence against women.
Thank you very much. The treaty has a five-finger goals for ending violence against women, and that includes the legal, education, access to justice, collaborative, and resources. Because as much as we are talking about ending violence against women, and also advocating and educating and training actors, we cannot do it without money. So we have to mobilize resources, and that is why we have to come together globally to mobilize resources together, so that we use those resources to strengthen legal.
Yes, Betty, I think we're having some technical difficulties, but she's raising a very important point that by enacting this treaty, that these 5 areas will be advanced, right?
All documents like this treaty, and also strengthened the just.
Right. You know, so these are important. I'm going to switch over now to Meera and Najla to help us conclude, because I think it's very important. Sorry, I think we lost Betty, and hopefully she'll join us, but we're reaching the end of the program. These 5 dimensions, the legal, educational, access to justice, collaboration, and resources, very important, that when governments sign up to this treaty, we get to what Najet was talking about, is really the state commitments around ending violence against women. That is very specific to ending the violence, and that in these 5 ways, the treaty will help us get governments on board, including devoting resources to ending violence against women. So Meera and Najla, please help us conclude this discussion. What can people do? How should they get involved? We see the link at the bottom of the screen where people can go to everywoman.org/thepeoplestreaty to join in. What do you think, Meera?
Yes, of course. That's an excellent way where people can join in. They can also join in to endorse the treaty, because at the moment we have more than 1,800 activists across the world who have endorsed the treaty, and more than 843 organizations, over 128 nations. And the entire treaty has been brought forward by an extremely democratic and globally consultative process, so that it can factor the shared and the lived experiences of not just survivors, but also policymakers, practitioners, academicians, and so on and so forth. So, the treaty will actually be give an avenue for a monitoring of the interventions, both of the religious and secular leadership in any country. Because let us remember, while we've been dismantling and reinventing many institutions to rewrite gender relations, religious institutions have only been tinkered with. We are not talking about dismantling religious institutions. We are talking about interpreting religion in the right gender just manner through the lens of human rights, to recognize that religious texts and beliefs and teachings may serve as a roadblock, and it can also be a resource to the victims of violence, and also to deepen our examination of the text and the teachings, and to look at it from a gender just lens. And that can happen only when we have the treaty, and prevention education is one of the most important pillars of that treaty, which nations and social non-profit organizations and civil society will be able to monitor that kind of misrepresentation or misinterpretation of religion. Because
Fantastic.
let us remember, religion has been made by human beings.
Yes, that's right.
As an institution to understand God and to understand our relationship to God.
Wonderful. Well, that's a really good summation. And Judge Ayoubi, help us conclude and sorry we lost Betty, but Judge Ayoubi, so how do we go about, once we've shared the link on how people can sign in, what else can people do? And tell us how you see the treaty really being crucial to this campaign.
Yeah, actually, thank you so much, Karen. I think my colleagues already mentioned, but I think it's important to all of us as a movement, civil society organizations, private sector, government institutions, influencers, all of us, because we know that the violence against women was there and is still there thousands and thousands and thousands of years. And I think this is the time for us, this is the moment that we have gained so much tractions, and we are really working hard with our more than 1,700 activists to advance the treaty, to build the campaign. And the campaign is there, and we have governments like the President of Nigeria call for the global treaty, President of the Tshisekedi Congo call for the global treaty, and also Almagro, Secretary General of Almagro of the Organization of American States called for the global treaty. President of Colombia called for the global treaty. It means that we gained the traction. We want the community here that they are listening to us and they are watching us to join our call, join our efforts, and make sure that we are ending this violence that has been really affecting not only the women, but the families, the societies, and in our entire world. It's really affecting. So by participating in this campaign and working with the relevant government, with their relevant communities, will definitely make a huge difference, particularly working with the religious community. And I'm calling on them right now that if you could just help us to promote the culture of justice and equality, that will be definitely will have a very, very peaceful society for all of us and for our planet. Thank you so much.
Sorry. Thank you, Najla. That was a wonderful summation. And since Betty has been able to rejoin us, please, Betty, give us the last word. Tell us why you think this treaty is going to be so crucial as we work to end violence against women.
This treaty is going to be so crucial because this is the only treaty that is going to protect all women all over the world. We have other treaties, but they are protecting a section of women. For example, we have the Maputo, which is protecting only women of Africa, women who are living in Africa, And we have another a treaty that protect only women who are living in Europe. But the Every Woman Treaty is going to protect and take care of all women living in every corner of the world. We have CEDAW that is taking care, protecting women on every corner of the world, and has been protecting these women, and also very, very powerful. But CEDAW also have gaps. For example, CEDAW does not talk about violence against women. It talks about discrimination, which is not that powerful legally. We want a treaty that protects women everywhere, and a treaty that can ensure that women who are violated get justice. And that treaty is the Every Woman Treaty.
Well, thank you very much for that good overview from all of you. Very important. And of course, what this means is that governments are making this commitment, right? That is why the treaty is important. And it helps us hold them accountable for those commitments. So this is why it has the potential to be so powerful. Thank you to Every Woman Treaty for helping us organize this program. And thank you to Najet, Meera, Betty, and Judge Ayoubi. We were so honored to have you in this conversation, and let's keep it going. Everybody go to Every Woman Treaty, everywoman.org, and learn about the treaty. Get involved, bring it to your college clubs, bring it to your church, your mosque, your synagogue, wherever you worship or wherever you participate in global affairs, and let's do this together. Thank you very much. Goodbye.